and welcome to the book of Habakkuk. Now, by the time we finish sharing these lessons, I would have shared the lessons from our 27th book of the Bible. This feels good. I don't know about you, but to be making this amount of progress is very astonishing to me because it's just not something I thought was possible before now, but here we are. So let's jump right into the book of Habakkuk. So Habakkuk is a different kind of prophet. While his contemporaries delivered messages from God to his people, he speaks to God about the things that are happening. So the book is essentially a conversation between Habakkuk and God. And the conversation wasn't delivered directly to Israel, but it was about them and their impending destruction by the violent Babylonians. He prophesied, as Habakkuk, during the time of Zephaniah and Jeremiah, during those times, but he was a different kind of prophet, like we already said. Habakkuk had two main complaints to God. One, how God could stand by and allow such evil run rampant in the land. And two, why God will use such evil people and godless people like the Babylonians to carry out his judgment. Now, what was evident from what we read is that both Habakkuk and God cared about justice. But it was obvious that God's ways aren't our ways. And Habakkuk seemed to misunderstand God's, seeming inactivity as lack of care, because God wasn't doing anything at the time. He believed that God had stopped caring about them. But when God says no, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's not answering our prayers. We must know that he has better plans. So every time there's a no or a wait from God, know that the plan is always better. Habakkuk did not understand God raising up Babylon, which was worse than Judah, in his opinion, to exact his judgment. So both nations weren't exactly sinless, so why use Babylon? Right? In response, God gives him a vision and told him to write it down for an appointed time. In the very popular verses of Habakkuk, which is Habakkuk 2, Habakkuk 1, verse 2 to 4. Obviously, everyone knows it. Write the vision down, make it plain, so that he that sees that reads it may run with it. You don't may tarry, it will speak. I now see verse 4 in true light, in the context of the story, where it says, the righteous shall live by faith. Now, this is something I've always quoted just, sometimes perhaps maybe arbitrarily, but in light of the context of this book. So the righteous shall live by faith. So the righteous at that time, those that believed, would live by faith so that they will see what God has said would happen after the exile, right? I understood that during the seemingly dark times, God wanted to draw the people close to him. Remember, God and his word daily are what would keep them going in dark times. God pronounced 5 categories of woes on the Babylonians, because don't forget that even though they were an instrument of judgment through destruction, they too had destructions to look forward to. So he warned against their putting their hope in their wealth, security, power, pleasure, and control. Those were their focuses and their goals, and the pursuit of each of them led to specific sins which God would judge them for. Even though they were pronounced to Babylon, we could probably ourselves see somewhere in those categories where we may be guilty as well. I know I did. He called his people to refrain from those sins and refrain from them. Now, I love how Habakkuk questioned God. Remember back in Job, when Job was asking those questions, and when we learned that it wasn't wrong, to question God, but how we did do the questioning mattered, right? He acknowledged God for who he was and his mighty deeds, and came to him with the things that he didn't understand, and waited for answers and waited for God's timing as well. He committed to trusting God even through what appeared to be a confusing process. And that's an amazing lesson. But let me tell you what my hashtag getting to know God lesson was from here. Faith in God is a key ingredient to a successful life. The last verses of this book express Habakkuk's faith in God, even through a failing harvest and the threat of hunger, because at this time they were, inching very dangerously towards famine. He spoke of rejoicing through calamity and trusting God in what he promised to do, trusting that God was going to do what he promised to do. God strengthens us daily through our difficult situation if we just hold on to our faith through the trouble. So that's what I've learned from today, especially that verse, the righteous shall live by faith. So it's not just in good times, but especially in bad times. Hold on to your faith. It's the most important thing that you have to live a successful life in God. Thank you for joining me and completing the 27th book of the Bible with me. Tomorrow we'll go back to Jeremiah. See you here.